Hello everyone and welcome to All Things Watched. In this video we are going to talk about the series finale for the MCU Phase 5 project known as Echo, which was also the very first project that was underneath Marvel's new banner known as Marvel's Spotlight, which I think they say is going to be something where they sort of introduce characters that are kind of standalone. And if you haven't seen the past, 10, 15 years of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, then it wouldn't really matter. You would be able to jump into one of these, Spotlight series and not really have to worry about it. To some degree, I would even say that the special presentations were kind of like the Spotlight, like Werewolf by Night. I really loved that one, and that was, even though it was really considered a special presentation, I think you could still sort of say it was kind of like a spotlight because it spotlighted Werewolf by Night and also Alicia Bloodstone and whatnot. So I really like these little spotlights, and not only that, but even if you even in here with Echo in the very first episode, they did sort of spend the first half of that first episode catching you up on anything important that you would have had to see, that had already happened with Echo in it, such as Hawkeye. So they really did a great job at sort of intertwining what we've already seen and then mixed it in with all the new stuff. So for anyone that has not seen Hawkeye, it didn't really matter because they did a great job at, filling in the blanks here. In episode 1. So anyways, the series finale of this one is titled Mya, and as you know, every episode always began with someone from Mya's genealogy, someone from her lineage, and now we have, started with Chafa, and then it was Tuklo at one point, and then it was Talo, and I can't remember what the episode 2 was called, but it was still someone in her, in her lineage, and now we have gotten all the way down here now to herself, Mya, and this episode actually opens with her as a child, and I thought I read online that the person portraying Mya as a child is actually her cousin or something in real life, which is kind of crazy because they look so similar, but I guess that would make sense if they're actually related. That little girl does a phenomenal job at portraying Mya, and so it starts with her with a slingshot, and she actually ends up shooting the rock and hits a bird, specifically a bird that actually has some significance and symbolism to the Chata Nation, because this bird seems to actually somehow communicate with the Chata Nation to some degree, in the sense that it sort of warns them whenever something is going to happen, or sort of gives them a heads up, because we've seen it happen with Chola. It does happen again later on in this episode with Mya, and we know that it happens in previous times with Chafa as well. So this bird is very symbolic to the Chata Nation, and so Mya ends up actually hitting the bird. She ends up bringing it to her mother, and her mother, and she actually lies to her mom at first and actually tells her mom, I didn't mean to hit it, but then she ends up, opening up and confessing because her mom sort of calls her in on it. She's like, hey, don't lie to me. And then Mya was like, well, okay, I did try to hit it, but I didn't think I would hit it, so to speak. It was like she was trying to hit it to see if she could hit it, but she wasn't trying to hit it in the sense that she wanted to kill it. But she ends up bringing the bird to her mom, and her mom, her hands ends up glowing, which shows that she can tap into this Chata, power that Chafa and the previous lineage and ancestors ends up having, the same as how Mya tapped into it in episode 2. Her hands end up glowing yellow, and she was able to actually have increased strength. Well, in this case, Talo, which is Mya's mom, she's able to, and she ends up being able to heal this bird and actually brings the bird back to life. Now, in the previous episode, I think it was the previous episode, Chola actually said to Mya, while she was giving that cool origin story about her going out into the woods and giving birth, I'm pretty sure she said that in that sequence, I'm pretty sure she told Mya that Talo actually had the ability to heal. Well, she said that she was a healer, but here we see that she was literally a healer in the sense that physically she had the ability to heal. So it wasn't that she was just sort of, saying that in a metaphoric way or symbolic way. She meant literally Talo was an actual healer. which was really cool. And so, that once again, that explains why Maya has a lot of these capabilities and a lot of these powers, is because it has been passed down through the generations. Chola likely had it, and then of course Talo had it, and now Maya has it as well. And so then now here back in present day, we see Fisk. Fisk obviously never went away. He's still very upset that Maya chose her own path as opposed to his path, the path that he put down in front of her. She neglected it, and so obviously this makes him very upset. So he ends up coming, here and confronting Maya's mom. And I actually really liked how sly and how bold he sort of was, because this really does fit the character of Fisk. He looks at her and he says, well, he knows American Sign Language. He says, I learned because of my niece. And she's like, I learned because of my daughter, which would have been Talo. So I just really like how bold he was and how he just goes right in there and sort of makes himself at home and whatnot. Now, in the meantime, Maya, as we said, is not in town. She's still on her way to some destination, wherever it is that she's going. So she ends up stopping in here at the restaurant to grab a bite to eat. But in the meantime, back in Oklahoma, back in this little town where Maya's family is. As you can see, Biscuits is here and he got the little vest on his little dog, which is so funny. And he's basically arranging the parking here for the Chata Nation powwow. And, and of course, these people here driving this rig is Zane and a couple of other people. So you can tell that Fisk has already started to invade this town with his gang members and whatnot. So he's obviously here to stir up trouble, because he's probably trying to get revenge on Maya for choosing her own family over him, because he considers himself to be her family and he thinks that he should be her priority. He raised her, and she was a part of the organization, so it makes sense that he would be very upset over that. And so he ends up basically invading this town, I think, as a way to just make her come back and return home. And so when we come back to Maya then, and we see her sat down in the restaurant, she ends up getting the text message from Biscuits where he actually says, have you seen Pokney or Bonnie? They were supposed to be here an hour ago, but of course they never showed up. So obviously Maya, she's not a fool. She knows exactly what's going on, and not only that, but she knows the way Kingpin works and the way Fisk is. So I don't think it would take very long for her to come to that conclusion that most likely something has happened to them because she refused to get on the plane. And so she ends up coming back and rushing back really quickly, and she comes in here. As you can see, she has her gun, pulled and whatnot, and you can tell she's ready to go here. She's ready to really do whatever it takes to protect her family and whatnot. And when she comes in, she ends up coming face to face with her mom. And also worth noting as well is what you can see here right next to her mom is the uniform that the Chola was making, earlier in the episode when she had to go get the sewing machine and whatnot. You can see all the detail, design and all the symbols and everything really that relates to the Chata Nation, everything Chola put into this uniform, and I just thought it was really cool that also her mom is now here as well. And this was really an emotional sequence, because, well, for one, this is the first time she's probably seen her mom since her mom has actually passed away. Once again, I've seen some people sort of question this online, sort of saying, well, how is this possible? Why is it that she can only now see her mom and that she couldn't do all this stuff before? But once again, I sort of talked about this in a previous episode. I think that it was just because this is the first time she's coming back to her roots. This is the first time she's sort of not choosing to do bad things. She sort of left the gang. She literally came back home, and now she's surrounded by her, lineage and her family, and surrounded by the Chata Nation. And so I think that this is sort of, the ancestors reaching out to her, because now they see that she's trying and putting an effort in to want to get to know her family and sort of know where she comes from, to go back to those roots. And so when she meets her mom, once again, like I said, very emotional. Her mom ends up, using the glowy hand thing, her healing power, to heal her. And she tells her, now it's time for her to stand and fight for her family, and that it's okay for her to let go, and that she needs to try to overcome the fear, and she needs to try to heal herself from all the pain, from all the loss and everything that she's already done and whatnot. Which I thought was really nice, because it was a great way. I think Echo really needed to see this and go through this, in order to move on, or even to be able to try and start to move on, so to speak, just because, she never really had that moment. And so I think it was really fitting that they gave her that moment here in this episode, but they did it with her mom, through this sort of, power, so to speak, that was passed on from Chafa in the very first episode, which allows them to actually communicate with their ancestors and whatnot. And then we go back to the scene, then of course, of the car accident, and she's actually there with her mom. And once again, her mom is telling her, use your gifts, that all these ancestral people have left behind. You're fierce, you're strong, you're cunning, and she basically encourages her to, to try her best to move on, and rather than looking at the tragedy as something terrible, look at it as something positive, and not to forget that even though she might be dead physically, she's still very much alive in her, inside of her spirit and inside of her heart, inside of her soul. And it was just really nice to see that, to see sort of that side of the MCU, because we haven't really seen this type of thing in Marvel before, the whole, sort of native indigenous thing, even though there are lots of characters in the comics that do, have those types of roots, and lots of even like African, tribes and different characters and whatnot. So it was really nice to see Echo branch out into that. It was also really interesting that they chose Echo to be one of those, one of the first introductions to that type of world, because even in the comics, Maya is like a secondary of a secondary of a secondary character. She's not even like, almost, unless I would be willing to bet to say that even a lot of people would not even know who Maya is unless you're an actual advocate comic book reader. Because she's not, she I don't think, at least not up to probably 2000, around the year 2000, I don't think she had any of her own stories or any of her own comics. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe they did end up writing some in the more modern days, but I don't ever remember Echo having her own stories outside of Daredevil. At least from my experience reading comics, I've always seen her with Daredevil, but I don't ever remember her outside of that. But anyways, her mom ends up giving her the suit and basically tells her, put this on. This represents you and your nation. And also remember too that her grandfather Scully, he ended up giving her that new prosthetic leg, which also has the Chata Nation markings on it. So she's really decked out now, and she's really, starting to represent. And back when he gave her the prosthetic leg, he actually told her to wear it because she lives in New York, and it was a great way for her to represent the Chata Nation in New York. So it'd be really curious to see if she's going to have anything to do with stuff like Secret Wars, or will she be a part of like a new Defenders if they decide to make the Defenders, or reboot the Defender franchise with some new characters. I think she would fit in really good there. She'd definitely fit in with Daredevil and Punisher. I really hope that they do bring her back for Daredevil. I would love to see some of those Daredevil comics come to life, especially with her relationship with Matt Murdock. I think it's really appropriate. He's blind, she's deaf, and it's just really cool how, even they have to sort of come up with this whole new way of communicating, because she only uses sign language, but he can't see, and then, he can only talk, but she can't hear. So even that whole dynamic could be really interesting, but I don't know if Marvel will go that far. But I think it would be a missed opportunity if they didn't. And so she ends up receiving her uniform, and then it ends up coming to the powwow, the Chata Nation powwow. And honestly, the costume designs, once again, the score, whoever was in charge of the audio design for this series did a phenomenal job. They always landed the music. It was very, I felt like the music was always very intimate. It always drew out the emotion. If it did a great job at making you feel sad, but sometimes also very excited, but then also sometimes very angry, depending on what was happening. So I thought the editing and the sound designs were done phenomenally. But we get to this powwow, and as you can see, all the costume design and everything, it's just so beautiful, and they really did a great job with the set designs here. And from what I can tell from reading stuff online, it seems like Marvel really actually reached out to certain nations and whatnot, and apparently this was actually pretty accurate to a lot of powwows. I obviously have never experienced one myself, but from what I tell, they did a really good job and a very accurate job. And I also thought this was a really great way to introduce Maya in her new suit, by coming to this powwow, and then she's actually sort of a part of the powwow, and then she gets introduced, and our first time seeing it is really kind of from her perspective, of her going through this powwow celebration for that nation, for the Chata Nation. And so it was really cool that we got to see her costume for the very first time, while she's surrounded by all these costumes that represents where she comes from. And so she ends up seeing the bird, that bird that has whatever relationship to, to that nation and to that culture, and it basically tells her that to go into this warehouse. And so she comes in, and as you can see, once again, her costume looks really cool. It looks very sleek. It almost looks like a type of armor, and I really hope that we do see her show up. I think that would look really cool next to like a Matt Murdock or something. I'd even be curious to know if eventually she would do something with her face, if she would end up actually putting on something to cover her face. I feel like that could happen if she's in Daredevil. I feel like Daredevil, Matt Murdock, I think would tell her, that it would be wise for her to cover her identity for the sake of saving her family, just so that they don't get hurt. But I don't know that they will go that far. But it would be really cool to see her actually wearing some form of face mask, or like even something around her eyes or something. They could still keep it, have the, something around her culture or something. But I don't know. I think it would be really cool if she actually wore a mask. I'm trying to remember. I think she did wear a mask in the comics. I think she had a feather or something as well, but I don't know. I still think her suit looked really cool here. So she comes in, and of course Fisk is here, and the only little nitpick that I had with Fisk in this episode was that I feel like there wasn't enough damage done to his eye. I mean, she literally shot him in the eye back in Hawkeye, and I just feel like it was just kind of like a graze. It's like she shot him and he just kind of walked it off. I think they should have left him wearing the eye patch and whatnot. Now, maybe that was a part of the contract or something. Maybe Vincent D'Onofrio just didn't agree to that or something, or didn't want to have to cover, half his face with an eye patch. I don't really know why they chose not to make him wear the eye patch, but either way, I think they should have, because it would have been comic book accurate, and then also it would have been more realistic than him just, having a little scar next to his eye, being shot in the eye. That should have, I would think, that would have shattered his, eye sockets and his bones and stuff. So, to think that he just kind of walked it off is a little bit silly. But then again, I guess they could be trying to show how tough he is and whatnot as well. He did survive Daredevil, he did survive Punisher, and now he's survived this, being shot in the face pretty well point blank by Mya. So either way, here he is, and as you can see, he ends up having Bonnie and Chola. He has them held captive, and once again, he's just sort of, getting really angry at Mya and basically saying, I did all these things for you and whatnot. But then she ends up calling him out for killing her family, which I thought was really cool. And then he sort of, goes off on this little, temper tantrum, and it's kind of funny because he's almost like a big baby when you really think about it, especially his personality. Fisk is so used to getting his own way, and then all of a sudden, he doesn't, and he kind of wants to force her to choose. Well, he doesn't want to force her. He wants her to choose to be with him. But of course, she obviously knows that that's not the right thing to do anymore. Even Mya herself has come a long way now with trying to figure out, the difference between right and wrong, trying to find her own way. So, he just throws this like huge temper tantrum, which was so funny. But one thing that he does do here in this conversation is he does admit to her that he gave the orders and whatnot to kill his family. He's like, I'll kill them just like I killed your father, just like I killed your, the rest of your family, or something like that, he says. So, this obviously makes her very mad. But then they end up attacking her and literally like punching her right in the face, which knocks her down. And then we get probably, I think, one of the coolest scenes that we've ever seen in any of the MCU stuff, at least in recent times, which is when she gets back up. She's surrounded then by all of her genealogy. And it also did a great job, I think, at tying up or wrapping up and tying together all the other stories that we've had in the previous episodes that were sort of like a prelude. So in the first episode you had Chafa in the caves and whatnot, and and then, in episode 2, you end up having Loak, and her, we sort of got to see this native version of, like, lacrosse or something. And then in episode 3, you had Tuclo and whatnot. So I just feel like that image did a really good job at tying all that together, and really did a great job at showing her lineage, right from her and her mom, and of course, while her grandmother is still here, and Bonnie, and then all the way back to Chafa herself. And then when she ends up coming down to use her powers, she actually sort of morphs into all the different people from her lineage. Now, it's funny because I've seen a lot of people online actually think that she actually changed into them, but I don't think that that's what was really happening here. I think that was just more of a visualization of, what was happening symbolically. They were all being channeled through her, but I don't think that they were, I don't think that she actually turned into them. I think it was just more of a visual, something, to show us visually what was happening, was that she's channeling, all the other ancestors through her. And so, when she ends up doing this, she ends up giving giving the powers to Bonnie and Chola as well, and they're able to use the powers and whatnot. So you can see Bonnie, she's looking down at her hands, and then of course we go over then to Chola, and she was probably one of the funniest ones because she's an older lady and she's just able to beat up these guys using the power that Maya ends up giving to all of them. I think there could be a little bit of an argument made for Bonnie, like why was Bonnie able to use these powers, but why wasn't she able to tap into it the same as Maya? Like, why was Maya the main source of the power here when technically they're all a part of the same nation? But it's just one of those little things that was like a little hiccup there. You could just forgive it because just forgive it for the sake of the story. You could tell that it was done like this because it had to be, instead of it was more done because it had to be as opposed to making sense. And so then we come over to Biscuits, then we see Biscuits, and he's up in the monster truck, and he just runs over to two vans full of mercenaries, or full of the gang members, I guess, really, not mercenaries, but he ends up taking them out. And then of course we end up coming to Henry, and he ends up shooting a guy that was on top of one of the vehicles there, and he had a rocket launcher that I'm assuming he was just going to shoot into the crowd. I thought that was a little bit silly, for Fisk to go that far, to have someone shooting a rocket launcher into a group of people, just even for the sake, considering that he do live in this world full of the Avengers and and whatnot. So, and not only that, but he's not in New York either, so I don't suspect that he has the ability to pay off the Oklahoma police. I mean, he might own some of them, but I got my doubts he owns as many as what he would at New York. So I did think that was a little silly. And then plus, when Henry shoots the guy ends up shooting the rocket launcher, and it goes up in the air and then blows up like a firework. That was a little cheesy too, but once again, it was something that you could kind of overlook and just sort of forgive. And then we end up getting to the final battle, then of course, between Fisk and Maya. And I'm really happy that this fight went the way that it did, because as I said in a previous episode, I wasn't really sure how would you end, how could Maya just sort of walk away from this world. Fisk is not going to let her just walk away, but at the same time I didn't really think that Fisk would kill her either. But then also, I didn't think that Maya, well, we know Maya wasn't going to kill him because he's in the upcoming Daredevil series, Born Again, which I think comes out next year, and it's going to be a longer series, 18 episodes. So that's pretty exciting to see an actual full-length series, and especially with someone like Matt Murdock. So I was really curious about how would they finish this and have it make sense, because we can't have Fisk just keep losing over and over and over. And so they did do it in a way that I thought made sense, where she actually ends up using her healing powers, and she ends up trying to heal his mind. It's almost symbolic, like she was trying to heal his heart, and then she tries to heal his mind, and she actually ends up taking him back to that place. Once again, a great callback to the Netflix original Daredevil, and takes him back to the place where he was growing up when his mother was being abused, and he was in the room crying and whatnot. And then of course we see the white wall, once again very symbolic to the Daredevil show. He ended up actually buying the painting from Vanessa, and this is not actually the painting, this is just a white wall, which really is a callback to season 1 of Daredevil, when he used to be forced to look at the white wall. But I thought it would have been cool too if they had to put the white painting on the white wall. I think that would have been pretty cool too. But then again, I guess for the purpose of this scene, they're trying to have it symbolic, with him feeling that pain and that rage, and plus the wall was breaking and cracking, so it was almost like that itself was symbolic, with Maya trying to break through to him, but the wall never actually breaks, and of course she never actually breaks through to him. And we get this really emotional scene when she's here standing up talking to him, and she actually cries, which is actually probably the most emotion that we've seen from Maya so far. And I don't mean that because of the actor. I think Alakwa Cox did a phenomenal job, and she was cast perfectly for this role. I just mean that it was the first time that we're finally starting to see Maya now go through this transition from being just a gangster and wanting to be the queen pin to now actually becoming more humane and starting to really feel regret and have sort of a humbleness to her. She's really starting to learn what it means to be a hero, thanks to her mom reaching out to her from the ancestral plane, thanks to Fisk sort of pushing her to this point and whatnot. But I still absolutely love this scene, because even though she's crying and he's totally rejecting her, she literally looks at him and says, "Please, uncle, stop fighting. just walk away, come back with me, or something along that lines. She just tells him to let go of the pain, and it was so emotional because you can tell that they're both so much, still, in love with each other. He still looks at her as a niece, and she still looks at him as an uncle. And I just thought that this was the perfect way to end it without it being an actual fight, where one of them has to lose physically. Instead, they sort of both lose emotionally, but they both win physically. Well, neither one of them really win or lose physically. It's just they both kind of walk away, but emotionally it's almost like they both sort of lose. But I think that this was also the first time that Fisk was ever put in this situation with with vulnerability. I don't think he was ever this vulnerable before, even in the Daredevil series. Back in the Daredevil series, Daredevil did a great job at beating him up physically, and he was able to physically overcome him. But here Maya was actually able to sort of almost break a fourth wall, no pun intended with the wall, but it's almost like she reached him on a completely deeper, more impactful way, which I feel like will lead into Daredevil Born Again with the post-credit scene, which will come up, which we'll talk about now in a few minutes. But I just feel like, this was really this was more painful for him than what it was when he got beat up by Daredevil. Because getting beat up, you just heal, he'll recover and whatnot. But from this had some serious damage. And as you can see, once he finally gets away and gets back in his car, you can see that he's just emotionally and probably even mentally, he's just shattered here right now. And he has to get out of there as quickly as he can because he needs to go and recover. And then we end up getting back to the flashback sequence in with Maya as a child and her mom Talo, and they have the bird, and the bird is healed, and then the bird now is released and set free and flying off on its own, which of course is very symbolic now to Maya herself. She's now set free of this world. She's now free of Fisk and the power and manipulation that he had over her, even though she still loves him. She's free now of that manipulation and free of that control, and now she's free to do what she pleases. And also she herself has become a healer as well, and it's so nice. And then by the very end of the episode, then we see her basically going from one family, which was Fisk and that sort of gangster life, to now she comes back to her real family and her lineage and her blood relatives, and now she's a completely a different person. She's now that bird that's set free, and she's embracing this new this new life now of peace and love, and she's really now in the right step forward, taking the right steps forward now to become, like I said, she's pretty well an anti-hero now. I still wouldn't go as far as saying that she's a hero. I think she still has a lot of redeeming to do. We can't just forget about the fact that literally 2 episodes ago she did kill a bunch of people, but I do think that she's definitely an anti-hero now, and she's definitely on the right path forward. And she definitely saved this town for sure. And she was willing to put her own life on the line, which really is the definition of a hero anyways. And it was just really nice to see them all come together. And, Chola ends up going over and giving her a hug. And it's all very warm and welcoming. And, of course, Bonnie's there, Henry's there, Biscuit's there, and everybody's there. And that's where Maya's story ends. And then we get to the post-credit scene then when we have Fisk, and he's on the plane on his way, I assume, back to New York, and then we see the TV display come on talking about how New York now needs a new mayor, and how the people of New York are sick and tired of all the people that are running, and all the previous electors, people that have been elected to be mayor before. And so this obviously gives Fisk the idea now that he's going to run, because even the media was saying that they're looking for someone who's willing to stand up to the system, who's willing to stand up to the politicians and whatnot. And so Fisk now is going to take that role on and become the mayor. And that's really how episode 5 ends, and that's the post-credit scene. Anyone who knows the comics or has read, anyone that's read a lot of Daredevil comics knows that he will absolutely become mayor. In fact, Mayor Fisk is one of the best, most compelling storylines of Daredevil. He just does so much stuff, and I'm hoping that they'll allow Spider-Man to tie into this as well. Kingpin technically is a Spider-Man villain, more so even than Daredevil, I think. And, this is a great opportunity for Kingpin to sort of be this almost like this overarching villain for all of the Defenders and all the street level heroes, whether it's Iron Fist or Jessica Jones or Matt Murdock or in this case Echo, and then even Spider-Man. If they end up taking him back to being just a friendly neighborhood and they sort of leave Spider-Man alone and sort of stop having him be like this big Avenger, then he could even be, Fisk could be the person that brings, together the Sinister Six. And I have no doubts that once he becomes mayor, he will pass the anti-vigilante law, which means he will make it illegal for vigilantes to exist. So that will obviously cause big problems for Daredevil and everybody. And so I'm very excited to see where the story continues. I thought I've seen online somewhere someone like a Marvel rep or something did say at one point that Echo was supposed to set up Daredevil Born Again, and so you can see that already. This one post-credit scene is definitely how that would happen. This scene is definitely setting up Daredevil Born Again because of the fact that he will become mayor, and I suspect that'll happen very early on, probably within like the first 1 or 2 episodes, maybe even 3 episodes if you really wanted to push it, because I think Born Again is supposed to have 18 episodes, so I suspect that he'll become mayor very early on and whatnot. And as far as I know, I think I read somewhere as well that the guy that played Bullseye in season 3 has also returned to reprise his role, so I wouldn't be surprised if they actually have Bullseye working for Fisk. Maybe Fisk hires Bullseye and actually sends him out to kill Daredevil and Daredevil's friends and whatnot. Either way, I can't wait to see Fisk's story and see where that goes and where that's heading. And in terms of this series, Echo, I thought it was a great job. I think this story absolutely had its flaws. The pacing was a little bit off. It was a little bit rushed at times, and then it kind of went a little bit too slow. But overall, I think that given the fact they only had 5 episodes, and this is the very first TVMA that they've done, especially for Disney, and the very first time that they did anything under their Marvel banner, Spotlight banner, then I think that this was a great first time. And it does give me a lot of hope for Daredevil Born Again. I just hope that they keep that nitty-gritty that the Netflix series had and whatnot, because I think that if they don't do that, then a lot of people are not going to like it, because we're already used to Netflix and Netflix's take on stuff like The Punisher and Matt Murdock and whatnot. And if you're going to bring back these actors to continue the story and actually make Netflix canon, then you can't change that in their own series. Daredevil has to be rated R, Punisher has to be rated R, or else nobody's just going to care, and you're just going to leave a sour taste in everybody's mouth. But I do think Echo was a great first step, and like I said, it had its flaws for sure, but I do think it was the right step forward. And with that being said, folks, I absolutely love this series, and I love this episode, and I can't wait to see Echo again, and I can't wait to see Fisk again, and honestly, I hope we see all of Maya's family again: Henry, Biscuits, Bonnie, Chola, and Scully. It would be great to see all of them again in the future at some point in the MCU. So with that being said, folks, that's my review of the finale of Echo. Let me know in the comment section below if you've seen it, and if you'd like to tell me why or why not. If you like this video, click that subscribe button, and until the next one, take care.